Mobbed by media as he entered a closed-door court hearing in the Dominican Republic. This is video from Dominican media outlet El Nuevo Diario. The man once labeled the person of interest in the case of the missing college student on spring break, making his plea to authorities in the Caribbean nation to get his passport back. His lawyers claim he's been confined to his hotel room as people look for the girl he was last seen with. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Today, Josh Reeby appeared in a Dominican courtroom. He is the last person to be seen with Sudiksha Konanki, the 20-year-old University of Pittsburgh student who vanished 12 days ago on spring break. Today, Reeby's attorneys are demanding he get his passport back so he can go home. This is what the crowd looked like as Reeby entered this courthouse Tuesday afternoon. This video per Dominican media outlet El Nuevo Diario. His attorneys had filed a motion saying he was being wrongfully detained to his hotel room as authorities searched for Sudiksha Konanki. His attorneys claimed his passport was confiscated and he wasn't allowed to leave the hotel without police supervision. Here's another image of Reeby walking into court per Noticias SIN. The hearing lasted more than 4 hours. Reeby testified in his own defense, saying that Sudiksha's mom thanked him for trying to save his daughter. According to Fox News, the prosecution argued that Reeby wasn't being detained, but the police presence that has been around him for the past 11 days was for his own benefit, and he wasn't in handcuffs. This hearing comes a day after the family of Sudiksha Konanki sent this letter to Dominican authorities asking for her death to be declared. This is per Fox News. The letter reads that, quote, following an extensive search, Dominican authorities have concluded that Sudiksha is believed to have drowned. Her clothes were discovered on a beach near where she was last seen. The individual last seen with her is cooperating with the investigation and no evidence of foul play has been found. That's not the only statement recognizing this request that we received. This is from the Loudoun County, Virginia Sheriff's Office. They sent this out today. This is Konanki's local sheriff's office outside D.C., and the agency has labeled Joshua Reeby as a person of interest in her disappearance. It's not a criminal case, but a missing persons case still was a major label to put on someone that Dominican authorities considered a witness. The statement reads, quote, the disappearance of Sudiksha Konanki is tragic, and we cannot imagine the grief her family has been feeling. We've supported them throughout to ensure a rigorous, wide-ranging investigation. We have also met personally with them and continue to provide emotional support through our victim advocate unit. Sudiksha's family has expressed their belief that she drowned. While a final decision to make such a declaration rests with authorities in the Dominican Republic, we will support the Konanki family in every way possible as we continue to review the evidence and information made available to us in the course of this investigation, end quote. I reached out to the sheriff's office to see if they still consider Reeby a person of interest in Konanki's missing persons case. In an email, they said, quote, it's an ongoing investigation, but in that regard, he's not a person of interest anymore in that he's been interviewed as part of the case. It's still not a criminal investigation in any way from our perspective. He is not considered a suspect by us, end quote. Authorities in the Dominican Republic have spent the last 12 days searching for Sudiksha Konanki and questioning Joshua Reeby about what happened the last time he saw her. And this is the last time we see Sudiksha in that surveillance video on March 6th that was first released by Dominican media outlet Noticias SIN. It's 4:15 in the morning and she had just met a boy in the hotel lobby, his name, Joshua Reeby. He's a St. Cloud State University student originally from Iowa. They went to a bar with their friends at the resort and now Sudiksha, her friends, and Reeby were headed to the beach. At 5:55 in the morning, most of the group went home, but Sudiksha and Reeby stayed behind. Reeby told investigators that he and Sudiksha kissed in the water and then they were hit by a big wave and dragged out to sea. Reeby and Sudiksha tried to swim to shore. He said the 20-year-old girl became tired, so he put her under his arm, dragged her to safety, swallowing seawater along the way. Eventually, he made it to knee-deep water. And he says he placed her down in front of him, and that's when she got up and started to walk away at an angle to go and grab her things. Reeby said he asked her if she was okay, but he never heard Sudiksha's answer because he says at that moment, he started vomiting. He said it was from all the seawater he drank swimming to safety. Reeby said he then passed out on a beach chair and didn't wake up until the sun was up and he was being bit by mosquitoes. We see him return to the hotel alone at 9:55 in the morning. It is a story that many people have questioned, and even Dominican authorities, according to local media outlets, have believed that Reeby's been inconsistent, but at no point have authorities considered Reeby a suspect in a criminal case. In the Dominican Republic, they have considered him a witness in a missing persons investigation. Police did find Sudiksha's clothes in the days after the disappearance. Pictures from Dominican news outlet CDN show they found this cover-up on a beach chair and sandals on the ground. In their letter calling for a declaration of death, Sudiksha's family notes that there was no evidence of foul play related to those articles of clothing. It does raise questions about whether she ever made it to shore. Reeby was interviewed multiple times by investigators, including by the Attorney General for the Dominican Republic. In one instance, he answered dozens of questions, but in a leaked transcript to media outlets, it showed that he declined to answer several questions, citing advice by his attorneys. Investigators asked, "How can we verify that what you said is true?" And Reeby responded, quote, "My lawyers advise me not to answer that question and I will rely on them." He used that answer reportedly for several more questions. Those questions were, what do you think about the disappearance? Did you know the young woman? Do you remember if the young woman made any gestures or screamed while in the sea? Did you report to the authorities or the hotel what happened with you and the girl on the beach? Did you tell your friend what happened with you and the girl on the beach? All to which the report says he answered, quote, "My lawyers advise me not to answer that question and I will rely on them." The report said investigators told Reeby that he had a right not to answer questions, and he did have two lawyers with him for that interview. Other key pieces of evidence that we have include this surveillance video that Noticias SIN required, showing both Reeby and Konanke at the bar at the resort before they went to the beach, and both are seen vomiting from the bar. We also have this video of Konanke in the hotel lobby the night that she went missing, and she's wearing that white cover-up that authorities say they would later find on a beach chair. But while we have these videos, we don't have video of what happened on the beach. The Rio Republica resort said it has cooperated fully with the investigation. Joshua Reeby's hometown has stood by him as his name has become entangled in an international story. Posted on the Lyon County, Iowa Sheriff's Facebook page, a statement signed by friends of Joshua Reeby family says, "The Rock Rapids community stands behind and supports Joshua Reeby and his family. The Reeby family moved to town in 2015 and has been active in various school and community events and organizations. They're well known and loved. Josh has an unwavering devotion to his faith and a genuine kindness towards others. He exemplifies the values of compassion, respect, and integrity that are fundamental to our church and our community. We ask that you respect the Reeby family's privacy during this difficult time of uncertainty, while Josh focuses his efforts to help find Sudiksha Konanke. His family at home is providing support to their loved ones in the Dominican Republic. Please help us respect those priorities." As for Sudiksha's family, they signed their letter saying, quote, "Given these circumstances and after much deliberation, we request that the police department proceeded with the legal declaration of her death. We understand that certain legal procedures must be followed and are prepared to comply with any necessary formalities or documentation. Initiating this process will allow our family to begin the grieving process and address matters related to her absence. While no declaration can truly ease our grief, we trust that this step will bring some closure and enable us to honor her memory." Joining me now is criminal defense attorney Philip Dubé. Thank you, sir, for taking the time to be with us. What is seen today as Josh Reeby is entering a courtroom in the Dominican Republic? Can't imagine he would have expected this to be how his spring break would go, but it's been a very intense 12 days since Sudiksha Konanke went missing. What do you make of that scene and the fact that he has been, according to his attorneys, held to his hotel room as this search has continued?
Yeah, it's actually quite common in the DR, as we call it, Dominican Republic. And the reason why is that it is a pretty hot tourist destination. And frankly, a lot of crime gets committed at these resorts. And it's too easy for people to just hop a plane and hightail it out of there. So they have safeguards in place under Dominican law that are somewhat in conformity with the adversarial system of justice here in America. So, for example, they can hold you or take you in without a warrant for up to 48 hours. And if they want to hold you beyond that, they can release you, but force you to remain on the island, confiscate your travel documents, such as a passport, a visa, maybe even your boarding pass and your return flight home, just to ensure that you remain in the country while the investigation is pending. And I think that's what's going on. They still don't have enough evidence, at least as widely reported, that it's even a crime. So until they finally conclude that, they're going to exercise their rights under the Dominican code to hold the young man.
And he's been held. Apparently, he gave his passport up far longer than 48 hours prior. And this isn't even, I mean, you mentioned it, this isn't even a case, a criminal case. You know, this is a missing persons case. Typically in Dominican law, I mean, how long have you seen someone held for?
Well, it varies, frankly. I've seen it up to 3 months. Sometimes they'll hold them long enough just to make sure that they even have a homicide. Sometimes, if it's an ocean related homicide, which frankly is quite common there, they wait to see maybe if human remains wash ashore. If they do that, then the body goes to the coroner for an autopsy to determine cause and manner of death. But let's assume the body washes up and there's no sign of foul play, trauma, strangulation, any type of use of blunt force or an edged weapon or a firearm, then it could be ruled natural causes. And they close it out, return his passport, and off the tourist goes back to their native land. But for now, because it's still so recent, they just want to make sure that they are thorough before they cut the guy loose. That's all.
And as we were watching this hearing today, a lot of it was done behind closed doors. You saw him enter with the crowd surrounding him, and then it all took place behind closed doors. They did at one point let in local media without cameras or microphones. Typically, what type of access does the public have to Dominican court to try and figure out what's going on in a hearing that's related to a really big story in the country?
There was a paradigm shift back in the early 2000s. I want to say it was '01 or '02, where the Dominican Republic sort of shifted from the old inquisitorial system of justice to the adversarial system of justice, where you have all the American due process safeguards in place to protect the rights of a criminal defendant, or at least a suspect. And one of those safeguards is to make sure that there is an open, fair public hearing for all proceedings. So I don't think that they have made that seamless sort of 100% transition from the inquisitorial system to the adversarial system by virtue of these closed door sessions. I mean, that's typically what you see in underdeveloped third world nations where the systems of justice are still corrupt. They don't really want the public to know, and certainly the world in a high profile case to know what's going on behind closed doors. And that is clearly a violation of one of the most sacred tenets of due process, and that is the right to a fair, open public hearing. So I'm a little surprised that they're doing this. It could also be that there is sensitive information being exchanged. Who knows? Maybe there's discussions about a warrant issuing, charges getting filed, or maybe, God forbid, the body did wash up and there is evidence of foul play, and they don't want that to go public yet until they finish their investigative inquiry. So there's a lot of unknown sort of factors that are at play, but generally speaking, it is unorthodox to close the doors to a public criminal proceeding.
Yeah, and there's so many unknowns in this story since we started following it. Another big piece of information that came out today was from the family of Sudiksha Konanki, writing a letter to Dominican authorities asking that her death be declared. What does that mean for this story? And this, if they were to declare that, how would that impact the investigation and where this story goes next?
Well, there are several considerations whenever a family wants that death presumption declared under oath. First of all, it could be that this family is rushing for closure, that they maybe deep down feel that some lethal peril has happened and they've given up all hope that she will be recovered or found alive. So typically that means they want some type of celebration of life or funeral with dignity in a timely manner. And if you have a presumption of death and it is certified, they can get a death certificate in the state of Pennsylvania. And I believe the standard is that the person has not been seen or heard from for a minimum of 7 years, unless there is clear and convincing evidence of some peril that took the individual's life sooner. And if that's the case, then the coroner can sign off on a death certificate It can be issued to the probate court, and the court can make that finding. The other reasons why some people want that death presumption is there may be assets and an estate that needs to be distributed. For all we know, maybe the young lady has pets. Maybe she was a trust baby for all we know, and she was receiving disbursements from loved ones, and now it's coming to a halt, and they need that death presumption in order to reroute or redesignate that money. What else? It could also be that they want to sue for wrongful death. Maybe they feel that the resort or that the young man caused the death or is partially responsible. And when you have that death presumption, it certainly aids in your civil cause of action. And one other point, and that is under federal law, federal criminal law, if a U.S. national is killed abroad by a fellow U.S. national, that killer can be prosecuted on U.S. soil, even though the crime was committed abroad. But there are certain preliminary kind of requirements. One of them is the Attorney General has to make a determination that the evidence meets the elements for murder here. And number two, there has to be no evidence that a criminal prosecution has been initiated in that foreign country. And that's out of deference and consideration for other nations' laws and procedure. So sometimes when you have that declaration, it gives fodder to local U.S. attorneys, maybe in Pennsylvania, to pursue the killer criminally here on American soil.
Yeah, and to this point, the authorities have said that they believe it's a missing persons case, that it's not a criminal matter. But you do wonder if there's more evidence that comes forward. What would that look like if it does? But at this point, this is a missing persons case, and it seems like from the statement that the family agrees with that. The civil action part I find really fascinating, because I think of this all-inclusive resort, and anybody who's been on spring break, you've probably been to one, maybe in Mexico, the Dominican Republic. You don't have all-inclusive resorts like that in the United States, where you can, really get a package and you can just drink as much as you want for as long as the day goes. How does the law look at that? If the family were to sue and say that they were allowed to, drink as much as they did and then just walk right out to the beach, which just is not a great idea. What type of legal standing would they have to actually sue this resort if it's in another country?
Well, first of all, they're going to have to show that there was some type of negligence on the part of the resort or the actual individual who may have caused the death. If they don't have enough evidence, and that's what civil discovery is for. In other words, if they're filing suit for wrongful death, they're going to want to do depositions, for example, of anybody who might have personal knowledge of the events. They might want to do requests for interrogatories. They might want to do site inspections. I mean, there's just a host of discovery mechanisms and tools to gather evidence to prove up the wrongful death, which is rooted in civil negligence. And also, when you start getting people into a room under oath, they divulge certain factoids that weren't immediately made public or known by anybody else. And then what it will do is it will open the door to other possible avenues of admissible discovery. Now, on the other hand, if they do file a civil suit and they want to depose the young man who's under suspicion right now, he can take the fifth. If they're suing him in the United States, then the Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination attaches in civil proceedings, and he can clam up and say, you know what, I'm exercising my rights under the Fifth. I don't wish to answer any questions, and nobody can compel him to do it unless they grant him full use and transactional immunity. And we saw this with Bill Cosby. I don't know if you remember that, where he got deposed. Pennsylvania, ironically, prosecutors gave him a full grant of immunity. And years later, what happened? The victims of sexual violence sued him anyway. And he got criminally prosecuted and he got convicted. So it had to go all the way up to the state Supreme Court to say, no, this guy was immunized. The state cannot have it both ways, force him to give testimony under oath, waive it, and they get criminally prosecuted and hope for the best on appeal. So that could also be going on here. Now, there's no way to know this. It's all speculation just based on my experience. But I can't think of any other logical explanation as to why the family would want a declaration of death so early.
as far as suing a resort, can you sue a resort in another country? Or I guess in the case of what you know about Dominican law, like how, because those resorts are a key part of the economy, and I'm sure they're um, protected in many ways by the Dominican Republic. What grounds do you have to sue a resort if you feel that there's negligence? What court would hear that?
That's a great question. A lot of it hinges on international law. It could hinge on maritime law. And also, it depends on the cause of action. So let's say, for example, it's rooted in contract. You have booked 25 rooms to host a convention of doctors who are going to go down to the Dominican for a seminar and enjoy sand and sea. But then the night before everybody's travel plans, the hotel cancels. And everybody has to drop everything, change their plans. They've paid all this money ahead of time. There are clearly remedies here in the United States for breach of contract, and you look to the law of jurisdiction to see if the hotel, if the resort did anything to spread its tentacles out far enough to the United States to say that it was actually present here by virtue of its commercial transactions for jurisdiction to attach and for a judgment to attach. Now, as far as suing civilly in the Dominican, yes, of course. I mean, they do. Nobody's immune, frankly. And I think the only exceptions maybe is if you're a diplomat, if you're from the foreign embassy, maybe you're with the consulate general, or certainly you have some type of presidential immunity. But ordinary citizens absolutely have a right to sue for general negligence. We've also seen it with adulterated food and water at hotels abroad, where if they're serving you bad seafood and you get deathly ill, or they're serving you something against which you're allergic, you can bring a civil suit. So there is no bar to that.
As you've looked at this case over 12 days, and today from this statement from her family, they don't seem to believe that Joshua Reeby is a suspect. He was never called that, but don't seem to believe that there was foul play and that he had anything to do with it, and believe he was cooperating with authorities. The Loudoun County, Virginia Sheriff's Office, which called him a person of interest in her disappearance, seemed to walk that back today as well. But he did, through his lawyer, decline to answer several questions during an interview. Reportedly, Dominican authorities they found some inconsistencies in his story. What stands out to you at this point, where maybe we'll never know what happened to her, but him as as what authorities have considered a witness to a missing persons case?
Yeah, he's basically a lead at this point, which is quite preliminary under what I call this notion of accretion, where you can gradually build up to being a lead, a true suspect, beyond a person of interest, where you are now officially accused and charged in a criminal court. But let me tell you what I'm seeing here. Again, when I said earlier that Dominican Republic has made this shift from the inquisitorial system of justice gradually to the adversarial system, that means that there has to be certain due process safeguards in place. One of which is if you are a foreigner in their country and you are being interrogated or otherwise under suspicion for a crime, they must provide you with a certified translator in your native tongue. If they don't do that, it violates due process under their laws, and it could also violate various conventions throughout the world. So if he did not have a certified interpreter or translator present during questioning, there are so many nuances to the English language, to dialect, to people who might speak with an accent, to hold them accountable to anything and everything that they said during an interview, I think could violate due process. Unless and until they show that they had, in fact, a certified interpreter in the English language, I think anything and everything he may have said could be called into question.
Now I just keep saying it, not a suspect, and even not considered a person of interest, that term anymore, which can get people's minds going in certain directions. Witness to a missing persons case. But if and when he leaves the Dominican Republic, if this is not a situation that's been resolved, maybe some evidence comes to light down the road, just speculating, something happens. As soon as he's gone from the Dominican Republic, I mean, how likely is it that that's the end of the story about what happened to this young girl?
Well, assuming a warrant goes out and charges are brought against him, there is an extradition agreement between the United States and Dominican Republic. There is no doubt that they will apprehend him and bring him to court in Pennsylvania or whichever jurisdiction he's living in, and he will have an extradition hearing. And he can choose to fight extradition, or he can submit on it, and off he will go to the demanding state to stand trial or to face the music. Now, I will tell you that historically, even though we have this extradition agreement with Dominican Republic, they don't always enforce it. They don't always act on it, and they figure, well, if the person's out of the country, they left in good faith after they were told that no further investigation is pending, they may just close the matter and leave it to the civil arena to flesh out.
We'll see how it plays out. Day 12 since you went missing. Still a lot of questions. Looks like the family is looking for closure. Philip Dubé, criminal defense attorney, thanks for joining us and helping us break down Dominican law, which I know has been at the center of this in a lot of ways, people trying to figure out how to navigate this story through the legal system there. Thanks for being with us.
Take care.
We'll continue to follow this story out of the Dominican Republic. For On the Case presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.